Chair and CEO of the Climate Leadership Council, here to talk about a proposal they have looking at a carbon tax. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Pedro. Good to be here.
A little bit about your organization. Who backs it?
So the Climate Leadership Council was founded by a who's who of business and environmental leaders, as well as opinion leaders from across the political spectrum. What's so interesting is it's an odd bedfellow coalition looking for a bipartisan climate solution.
How much of that leadership and backing comes from oil and gas companies?
Well, maybe we could put up the first slide that I brought along, which shows the founding members of the Climate Leadership Council. And you'll see it's corporate sector leaders from almost all sectors of industry, as well as major environmental groups and opinion leaders from across the political spectrum. So oil companies and auto companies and others are part of our coalition, but it's a very broad coalition. And what's interesting is that all these parties are converging around a consensus bipartisan climate solution.
Why would an oil and gas company consent to the proposal of a carbon tax, which you're advocating for?
Because there are a number of options to solve climate change. Clearly, it's an issue of growing importance, and there are regulatory approaches which Democrats and especially left-wing voices are pushing. That's not pro-business. What we need is a climate solution that is pro-environment, pro-business, and pro-middle class, and that's what we've offered. So in a nutshell, our plan would cut carbon emissions by 50% by 2035. It would give every American family of four about $2,000 a year in what we call carbon dividends, and it would reduce and cut unnecessary regulations to enable businesses to innovate, create jobs, and invest in a low-carbon future.
So the tax itself, how would it work?
So all carbon emissions would pay a fee starting at $40 a ton. It would be economy-wide. It would increase energy costs, which is what reduces carbon emissions. But all the money raised goes directly back to American citizens, and a family of four would get about $2,000 a year. What that means is that 70% of Americans, including the most vulnerable, win by solving climate change. About 223 million Americans actually come out ahead, meaning they receive more in carbon dividends than they pay in increased energy costs. And that changes everything, because what you're doing here is aligning the economic incentives of ordinary Americans with climate progress.
What sectors will the tax be applied to? Is it oil and gas companies across the board?
All sectors of industry, all carbon emissions, no exceptions whatsoever. So everything where carbon is embedded, there will be a price, and that will reduce emissions across the entire economy. But we've done this in a way that helps American workers, helps the environment, but also is pro-business, because the debate has become far too partisan. So there are proposals on the left which are inherently anti-business. They'll never get bipartisan support. What we need is a solution where Republicans, Democrats can come together and a wide group of stakeholders can get behind it.
If this became regulation, is it basically saying, let us impose this tax, but don't impose new regulation on us?
Exactly. It's trading a meaningful price on carbon for regulation. So for example, this would displace all stationary source regulations, which make up about 2/3 of carbon emissions. And that's what gets you a deal that is bipartisan, that businesses and environmental leaders can get behind.
This again, our guest, Ted Halstead of the Climate Leadership Council. You can ask him questions at 202-740.